In the other room? Corny, I know. Welcome this afternoon to our meeting here, joint land use study. I get there. Yeah, right meeting. Just do quick around the table introductions. If you go ahead and start off.
Good
Mark.
afternoon, everybody. I'm John Terrell. I am the military partnerships manager for the city of Fountain.
And if I may, real quick, just to operate the microphones, you press the sort of talking voice face that's sort of to the right of center, in case you haven't been here in a while.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Shelch, and I work for the city of Fountain.
Thanks. How you doing? Mark Dettenreader, Teller County Commissioner.
Keith Klain, Chairman of the Defense Mission Task Force.
Ron Jevery, Director of Staff, Schriever Air Force Base.
Lieutenant Colonel David Sowinski, represent 302nd Air Wing C-130s.
Hi, Sam Johnson, 21st Space Wing, Peterson Air Force Base.
Hi, Amy Kelly, Air Force Academy Community Initiatives Director.
Chris Chapman, Planning Chief, DPW Fort Carson.
And Pico, Colorado Springs City Council.
Craig Doss, El Paso County.
Lois Littleton, Office of Economic Adjustment, Western Regional Office.
Ann Werner, Joint Land Use Study, PPACG.
And Brian Potts, Program Manager, Joint Land Use Study, PPACG.
Let me go ahead and we have a cast of thousands here, do we? We go ahead and introduce yourselves real quickly.
Nick Johnson, working with the JVation team at Colorado Springs.
Hilary Fletcher with JVation.
Good afternoon, Tony Davis from JVation.
So Bill Nichols was the Colorado Springs Airport Advisory Commission.
John Meyer, Colorado Springs Airport Advisory Commission.
Jeff Bond, Peterson Air Force Base. Kevin Keith, Colorado Springs Airport.
Casey Andrews, Colorado Springs Airport.
Kevin Weaver, Peterson Airport Management.
Mike Schaefer, Peterson Air Force Base.
John Kawash, Peterson Air Force Base.
Aaron Horstmeyer, Schriever Air Force Base.
Lisa Bachman, Bachman PR, and I work on the Joint Land Use Public Outreach and also working for CDOT on the I-25 CO94 Military Access and Mobility Safety Improvements Projects. Isn't that a good
Acronym. We need an acronym.
Greg Dyer, JVation. Travis Mullane, JVation. Jeff Robertson, Peterson Air Force Base.
Joe Allen, Peterson Air Force Base.
Okay, got everybody?
And then is there anyone on the phone behind you? We have the call-in line open, so.
Where is that? Oh, it's right there. Hearing none. Hearing none on the phone. Hopefully someone will come in if they need to. Okay, going around. First one up, Mr. Littleton.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lois Littleton, representing the Office of Economic Adjustment. I took over as project manager from OEA December 2018 last year. For those that aren't familiar with the Office of Economic Adjustment, our mission is to work with communities to help promote, in this case, compatible growth and compatible land use with the military installations. And so thank you for having me. My main purpose here is just to sit back, watch, and enjoy. I can say one thing for certain, that this Joint Land Use Implementation Committee, from everything that I've seen and heard, talking to Brian and Ann, is almost like a model for some of the other communities that we work with. So keep up the excellent work that you all are doing. The way that things are interacting and then spreading out is really good to see.
Thank you, sir. Very happy to have you here with us. Running down the agenda, we have the agenda in front of you. Are there any changes, recommendations?
I do have one note. We mistyped on the next meeting date, so you'll see on the agenda it says April 22nd. That is actually supposed to be April 23rd, because the 22nd is Wednesday, so that will be April 23rd, and I'll provide a reminder at the very end of the meeting as well.
Okay, any other changes to the agenda? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve. Have a motion? Second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Very well. Public comments, so if there are any comments not on a subject not on the agenda. And seeing none. We also have in front of you the minutes from the previous meeting. Any additions, deletions, changes?
This is Amy Kelly from the Air Force Academy. I just wanted to note that although I was with you guys in spirit, I was not actually in attendance at the October meeting.
Okay, that's been noted.
And with that correction, any other changes? Entertain a motion again?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the meeting minutes of the Joint Land Use Study Implementation Committee for October 24, 2019, as amended.
I have a motion. I have a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Ryan, the manager's report.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming today. Just want to give you a brief overview of some of the key things that we've been working on and hitting on since we last met in October. On November 13th, I want to highlight this, and I'm sure Keith could weigh in on this more, but I just want to let you know we did attend a State Land Board meeting that occurred in Denver that Keith Klain had organized with the military folks and the State Land Board to start a discussion on how the State Land Board and the military can work on encroachment issues with Mission together and figure out where there might be some opportunities to work on the way they're managing their lands that can impact the military. So that was a good discussion and great showing. There's a great attendance at that meeting. So thank you, Keith, for putting that on. We got a lot out of that. So we also, the Bureau of Land Management was planning to attend today, but due to a last-minute thing, they were not able to show up. They are planning to be engaged from here on out, and so we can expect the Bureau of Land Management to attend in the future. U.S. Forest Service, we still have not gotten a response back to them, so we're trying to engage these public lands working group partners as we go forward. So we'll continue to work on that. As you'll see later on in the agenda, we've had a few meetings with the Air Force Academy to discuss some of their top priorities, things that they're working on, and also Peterson Air Force Base to understand some of the other items that are of importance to them in preparation for the sub-area working groups that we hope to stand up starting next month. And we'll get into that more later in the agenda, but we've been having quite a few meetings there. And then we've also been regularly attending the Colorado Springs Airport Advisory Commission meeting. And yesterday was the airport presentation by JAviation. So to give you a background, JAviation is the consultant that's performing the master plan update for the Colorado Springs Airport, and they will be presenting right after this to kind of kick off discussion related to that. And then December 3rd, the Colorado Springs had their kickoff meeting for updating the Chapter 7 of their Land Use and Development Code. So that is going to be ongoing. Amy Kelly, I know, you're on the advisory committee, I believe. So that's getting going. So there'll be more engagement with the city related to that process and some of the activities here with JLUS implementation. And then also on January 8th, the PPACG board here approved the 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan, which is on a 5-year cycle. I think for now, it may change to a 4-year cycle, but we're on a 5-year cycle. So that's kind of what's guiding regional transportation policy to some extent, and it's kind of required through the Federal Highways Administration. So that is out there. We had some good input from the military installations during that process that fed into it. So that's out there or soon to be out there, I think, in its final version coming up on our website, and then you'll be able to read through and look at what some of the policy may be coming out for transportation. And then lastly, Pueblo County hired a new planning director, Carmen Howard. We've reached out to her because now she's in place, and we're going to see if we can start engaging Pueblo County and see what direction they're going with their master plan update, their county master plan update. So more to come on that. So with that, I don't have anything else. Any questions about general activities at this point? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we've got a presentation, previously mentioned here, the Colorado Springs Airport Master Plan Update from JAviation. Aviation. Mouthful. Hell. All right. I think it's been a whole 24 hours since I've seen this.
That's your bad luck. So, hello everybody. Greg Phillips, Colorado Springs Airport. So, what a great time to be planning in Colorado Springs right now, with the county as a master plan underway, with the Chapter 7 rewrite for the city, with the JLUS study and implementation, and for us at the Colorado Springs Airport, looking at land use and particularly compatibility of land use around the airport is just such a key and critical effort for us. And the kickoff to us for our master plan which will follow. So we've selected a great consultant for this. And I'm tickled to be able to work with JViation. They have, I think it's just the three of you here today, right? So I got the whole team here. So I'll let Hilary do introductions for them. But they're going to lead us through a process of looking at the land use around the airport and, in essence, to answer the question, how do we protect this vital economic resource for our community? You know, I've said this in our meeting yesterday that I have confidence that everybody recognizes that we need to protect the airport. The question is, what does that mean? Because it means different things, I think, to different people. And so that's what we want to answer through involvement by the community and deep discussion about how we do that and how we protect the airport and how we work with PPACG, work with the county, work with the city and planning departments so that we have a hopefully seamless process. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm delighted to introduce Hilary Fletcher, who can talk about what JViation is going to do.
I'm a lefty and it's a righty mouse, so that's going to be a challenge. I'm going to put that out there right now. So thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. We're excited to be part of this discussion. It's an exciting project for us, and as Greg said, what we're doing with this land use compatibility study is it's an enabling project to the master plan. So it's a key element, and we'll be working on it pretty aggressively here for the next several months. And we have our team here today. Nick Johnson, he'll come on up and introduce himself, but Tony, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tony Davis. I'm the Senior Airport Planner Project Manager for JViation. I am the project manager for the project that we're talking about here, the land use study. I'm excited to be here and work with you guys. Thank you very much for the invite.
Great. And Greg and Travis?
I'm Greg Dyer, Director of Aviation and Airspace Services at JViation, formerly 35 years at that facility. Travis Boeing, one of the principals of JViation, formerly at CDOT for
Former aeronautics director at CDOT. And I'm Hilary Fletcher, 10 years with JViation and then 20 years in local government, county government up in the mountains, up in Aspen. So I'm very familiar with the connectivity of all of our municipalities and governments that have to play in this conversation. So I want to talk a little bit about what the goals of this study, what we're going to try and accomplish, but we really do want to spend some time with the airport understanding the complex nature of the issues that they're facing with respect to land use and land use development occurring around the airport. Our mission, obviously, is to ensure the viability of the airport moving forward into the future and not putting it in any difficult environment or undue constraints. We also want to update the land use patterns around the airport and understand those, establish some guidelines for use by the airport as they review land use applications, and give them a methodology and some criteria as they review process. And we had the opportunity to present at the commission yesterday, and it was really telling. I think you had 11 land use applications that you were looking at, the prior meeting 22. So as you know, there's tremendous growth and a lot of it occurring in and around the airport. We want to be, we're in the right place to be making these decisions and have these conversations with stakeholders in the community. The project components we're working through inventory and demand forecasts. We have a noise analysis that's underway right now. We'll be providing existing noise contours as well as future noise contours. So we're looking at fleet mix and things like that, operations, and we want to understand all of the dynamics in play in order to adequately provide a good, solid land use plan for the airport. In the process of that, we'll be engaging with stakeholders, and in that timeline that we have, we intend to meet with development community members, key stakeholders, obviously tenants and users at the airport, but getting a good sense of the needs and getting a good sense of the community. We'll be working with the city and the county planning departments. We'll be coming back on a regular basis to be working with you as well. But we really want to hear from folks and understand what the needs are today, but what the needs are going into the future, what you see, and what the issues are that are in front of us. So this process is slated to deliver a draft list of recommendations by the end of May, early June. We had a caveat based on noise contours, but we're very happy we got the data in from the FAA this week, so we're well underway to continue this process. Any questions so far? Yes. Yes.
Visiting jets and our resident aircraft, everything is calculated.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
We did expand our typical data search that would be used to generate noise contours to collect data from the FAA using what they call PDAR data. It's a database of civilian and military operations just for that reason.
Yep.
For that reason.
Yeah. It's essential in this conversation that we have that. So I'm going to invite Nick up. We had a really great meeting with the commission yesterday. Some of you were in the room and heard that conversation, but we posed a series of questions to the commission about what obstacles and challenges they saw, and Nick was key to sort of facilitating that. And we want to actually open the dialogue a little bit here, too. And ask you those questions. We'd like to hear from you about what you see coming forward. And I'm going to turn it over to Nick, and I'll just hang out here and take notes.
Hilary, thank you so much. Again, Nick Johnson, working with the team, and yeah, a lot of faces. We talked about a lot of the same things yesterday with the Airport Advisory Commission. My background, for those of you who weren't there, I work with folks like you, kind of all over the place. I've done a lot of work in Southern California, working with base realignment process there and joint use. Having gone through, in fact, I was, the exact process that you guys are dealing with, March Air Reserve Base. We've done very similar, worked in the community to help them get to a point where they had plans in place that really worked with the military in a way that limited encroachment like they had never done in the past. They had a lot of open land previously. It's been developing over time, and just making sure that the two can live together. And so a lot of what we want to do with you here today is that obviously Peterson is incredibly important to what Colorado Springs is as an airport. The comment just a second ago, absolutely. In fact, a big reason why we're here today is we want to really engage with you guys beyond today to make sure that we have your fleet mix, even the occasional operations, included in this, so that we have the best military footprint, best military fleet mix relative to everything that's going on there, including all the civilian operations. So that's really what we're about. You guys have been engaged for quite a while. We've followed your study from afar. We've seen what you guys have been working on. We want to dig deeper, though. One of the things that we don't have an advantage of coming into this is we don't have an ACU study that's fresh, that's sitting on the shelf right now. And so being able to make sure that our noise analysis is comprehensive, correct, and that we've got a forecast that begins to look to the missions that you guys are engaged in, not only today, but where you see your mission heading to into the future. That's really critically important to the success of where we're going. And so there's a bunch of questions up here, and I've stalled for a bit to give you guys a chance to kind of look through that a little bit. But I want to take a few minutes here and engage you guys, particularly the folks here representing Peterson. It's great to you've got. I think you outnumber us today with more Peterson folks than Javiation folks. So that's a good thing. But take the opportunity to start a conversation about what you see as a success for doing this land use study to protect the airport, the base, the missions that you're all involved in, as well as work with the community so that the community sees this. And when I say the community, I mean in the broadest sense. Landowners, developers, residents, everybody that is involved in our community taking advantage of this great economic asset that we have in Colorado Springs Airport. It's really about making all of it work together in the best, most compatible way possible so that for 40 years from now, your mission is still protected from encroachment and the airport is successful, that the community is successful. Folks live and thrive in the community without having noise impacts and other things that we can do something about today. So that's what we're here to talk about. I'm done talking about it. I want to hear from you guys. So we've, particularly for those of you on the panel, but anybody in the audience, particularly all our friends from Peterson, as you look at some of these key questions, talk to me a little bit about what you see as success from a land use study that works to preserve your mission and what's happening at Colorado Springs.
Sure. Sam Johnson. I'll start it off, I'm stalling, so I give the experts an idea to talk. But I think our two biggest concerns are probably access and safety. And by access, I'm probably going towards the preventing encroachments. We don't have any altitude limitations. It was good. He brought up pretty much all kinds of military aircraft. We have C-130 stationed here permanently, but we all know all of them come in, Navy F-18s and to F-22s, F-35s. We have F-15s here this afternoon, I think. And so we don't want to have any limitations on any of the aircraft coming in. And I know that if we have tall buildings at the end of the runway, that causes problems for us. So that's kind of where I'm going with that one. And on the safety side, a couple, just to give you an idea of safety concerns, would be small drones flying over the airport. So we want to keep that encroachment out for any type of threats like that, or anybody on the ground that would have lasers. There's something, just a couple things off the top of my head just to give you an idea with safety. Besides the standard airfield safety, like bird strikes and things like that, which may be out of the land use discussion, but I think the other ones that I talked about are more human-caused problems that would be exacerbated by humans being closer to the airport and closer to their own way. So to me, that's the two major topics off the top of my head. But I'll turn it over. 302nd Air Wing, he knows way more about flying than I do. And I got airfield ops here and the CE guys, so anybody who wants to jump in.
And if I could, real quick, you bring up drones and bird strikes. Drones in particular is drones and lasers. Something that as those of us who have done joint land use in a lot of places, that 10 years ago we didn't even talk about that, and now it's going to be a permanent part of our language going forward. On the bird strike side, oftentimes we think, just wildlife in general. You think about, wildlife protection and what it means, but also the type of development you do, the type of trees that you plant, the type of vegetation that you have associated with development near the airport. Oftentimes, you've got space for raptors to be able to nest or to hunt, and that creates a bird strike problem. And so doing not only smart land use planning, but having criteria within your land use planning that supports not creating bird strike hazards. So it's a great point, and definitely the type of stuff we want to get into. And Colonel, I think you were next.
Yes, so I guess maybe I can caveat on that again, Lieutenant Colonel Sowinski up to 302nd. So on the C-130 side, maybe one thing that I think we consider is climb performance of the military aircraft, specifically the military missions in the context of our high pressure altitudes and summertime temperatures. So, for example, if like was touched upon, the obstacles, if they get developed, those may become significant problems for our aircraft. Heavyweight, for example, MAFs were extremely heavyweight, and many of you, I'm sure, remember the Hayman Fire and Waldo Canyon Fire. Maintaining that ability to get the heavyweight aircraft off in the summertime, I think, is important to kind of emphasize how obstructions can do that. And again, if your database only considers, 787 performance, you're missing the point of a heavy military aircraft in the summertime.
Go ahead, Kevin.
From our side, like I said, we work in partnership with the C-130 second. But the other part is we host a lot of TDY units, and they're out from the Marines, Navy, Army. And what's happening now is that as we're gathering them, a lot of them don't necessarily fly over the airport for extended period of time. A lot of them do a lot of approaches, and some of them might do a few. But a lot of them do range down in Carson. So as you start going into that area, that'll be more of a, I guess, a concern as far as obstacles and construction. So anything that's going into that direction, then that's probably when that comes up. Which it doesn't sound like anything is going around that area, but like I said, it is something that we do need to be concerned with. And so we're in charge of talking with the city as far as our post place, make sure the minimums we're talking about so that anything that's coming in opens up for those strike something. Like I said, bird strikes, that's the big thing. The lasers, like I said, we work with the city so that this is something on the Peterson side that we are talking to our street forces, passing that information along so that we can help catch the offenders, just different things like that. So we're kind of where we make our suggestions, our recommendations, because a lot of it we do not have any control over. We do have to defer to the city of Colorado Springs Airport and say, hey, here's what it is from our side. And then they do a great job of taking our suggestions and we just kind of collaborate and make sure that we keep the safety alive.
Yeah, appreciate that. Kevin, it's we met with the tower folks at Colorado Springs today, and we were talking with them, and they brought up the break approaches that you guys protecting airspace for that. Even though you don't today have those wings necessarily based here, but TDY, they're showing up on a regular basis, doing high altitude training up here, those sorts of things. That's the kind of thing. And even as Space Force stands up and becomes what it's going to become, which is probably going to evolve over time. What does that look like from a flying mission? And what does it take on in terms of character protecting for whatever that character may become? Having a flying wing already there is very helpful to protect for that, but and frankly having 15s and others showing up, but making sure that the facility is protected for that well into the community.
That's true. Now with the Space Force, how that impacts this discussion is the base is only going to get busier, and we're the second busiest DV airfield other than Andrews Air Force Base. And if U.S. Space Command basing decision is for Colorado Springs, it's only going to get busier. And so we know that's going on. And Kevin, when Kevin mentioned other ranges, it made me think of one thing that I hadn't thought of before, is we have a new helicopter pad up at Cheyenne Mountain. So we could use the city's help keeping the encroachment off of that new pad.
Hi, Amy Kelly from the Air Force Academy. I just want to mention that Air Force Academy is a user of the Colorado Springs Airfield, so just making sure that when you have your PDARS data that you're capturing our sorties. I don't have the precise count on the tip of my tongue, but making sure that we're included. Absolutely. And then also, as I'd be interested in understanding your assessment of the efficacy of airport overlays and any recommendations that you may have for improving or changing the airport overlay zoning, because we have an interest in perhaps using a similar tool to protect our airfield.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to spend a lot of time as we go forward on this, because for those of you who don't know what an airport overlay zone is that from a land use planning standpoint, you can have plans and programs, but to have regulations in place that actually allow you to enforce those regulations within the areas that are actually impacted by operations. So you take a very close look at what areas are actually impacted, and that's why we're doing all this work to make sure that we know the scope of the geography of impacted area. But then having the airport overlay zone within your code so that anybody who's doing development within the area knows clearly what the area is, what impacts to that area would be, and that if things change over time, you're changing the overlay zone. You don't have to change the legislation every single time that you pick up or something changes within your community, or the operation changes, or the basing changes, as the case may be. So airport overlay zones are a great tool. A lot of the hard work of overlay zones with any kind of land use planning comes to what goes into it, and so the harder we work now to define what's going into the land use plan and look further ahead into the future as to the types of operations that we're going to be dealing with, the better off we're going to be in coming up with that type of an approach. It's not the only way that you can do it, but it is one way that's a little more flexible in terms of what it means for local jurisdictions, the city and the county primarily, in terms of enacting actual legislation to protect the facility. One of the things I was thinking about with the base here as well is as we look forward, you guys today not only have the wings that operate there, but DoD personnel, contractors, other folks who are part of your operation, the larger part of your operation, fly in and out of Colorado Springs to work here, and that's another big consideration that I think we have to really kind of keep in mind. Oftentimes we forget about all of the travel that you have to do as part of what you do. That comes back to Greg, what you're doing and just running an airport as far as the civilian side and providing air service for all of us to be able to participate and have the most direct air service we can possibly have to the places we need to get to do the work that we do to support your mission. So that's one of those parts that sometimes gets lost in the mix, but it's really important that we begin to identify, as Tony was saying, as he works on his forecasts, for the master plan, let's make sure that kind of information is thought ahead in creating that forecast. So some of the rest of you guys talk to us a little bit about, as you read through the questions, are there any things that are jumping out here that concerns? We had some good interaction with the city and the county staff yesterday. Other folks that, challenges you guys are facing. Yeah, that's a good part, and that's the best part of what's the follow-on to this is the full master plan for the airport. Taking that broad look of all the facilities and how they interact, not only as the airport itself, but interacting with your base facilities. I mean, they're essentially co-located, and what does it mean as everything else develops around it, and the traffic that comes with that? What does that mean for accessibility for your personnel, employees, contractors, everybody that have to go to work on a daily basis. So it is part of this bigger picture, and I think that's kind of Greg's vision all along is that this becomes this larger vision of what Colorado Springs Airport is to the community. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that, we've got Fort Carson Airfield to the south, Air Force Academy to the north, Meadow Lake to the east, Bullseye Training Area. To what extent can we consider the impacts of those flight activities to this study, and to what extent can we study the impact or include the impacts of your study on those other airfields? The routes are intertwined in many cases, approach patterns and landing patterns and the like. At the end, I'd like to think that if this study doesn't include those things, at least it's written in such a fashion that we can follow on and dovetail some follow-on considerations for each of those other flight entities.
I think it's a perfect segue, and I'm actually going to ask Greg Dyer to come up and talk to us. You get the Segway Award because he's got $5. So the reason we met with the tower today, one of the key questions that we asked them is, Class Charlie airspace, and what does that mean for each of those airfields that you talked about, and how do they interact? What was brought up about the Air Force Academy's field and how much they use Colorado Springs as part of their training activities. So it's a great time. Greg's got some slides that he'll pull up and show you, but I think that's a great point.
Thank you. That was a great segue. Thanks for that question. And the viewing angle might be tough for you guys over here. Which button is it?
I think you can just down. There you go.
So just to orient what I'm about to show you, we like to start with kind of a snapshot of all the activity that happens in the area. I don't think of this as any discrete point sources or discrete airports. It's kind of like we're all living in a neighborhood where we share a common area for our backyard. What we all do affects what everybody else does, which is exactly your point. So for the next two slides that I've got after this, they're all scaled off of this. The gray circle is a 25-mile radius around the Colorado Springs Airport. Our 2601 range area is outlined to the lower left. The little jumble of characters in the middle is where the Colorado Springs Airport is. The little jumble on the upper right is Meadow Lake, and the little jumble on the upper left is the Air Force Academy Airfield. So I took I looked at a couple of different days, but this is one day in the summer on a weekday, and this is 24 hours worth of traffic in the Colorado Springs area. And the color coding I can explain to you offline if you like in more detail, but the green lines are arrivals to the Colorado Springs Airport. Yellow lines are departures from the Colorado Springs Airport. The gray lines are visual flight rules aircraft. And you can kind of see between the two slides that I'm going to show you, if you look at the range, you can see different activities from day to day. It's always impressive to see how much is going on down there. You can see pretty significant activity at the Air Force Academy Airfield, and then the arcing path over to the right where it goes off into training and maneuvering areas. You can also see that there's a prominent piece of terrain on the west side of the town that affects aviation activity, so it looks like all of the activity goes east. Obviously, Pikes Peak drives that. You can see a little bit down at Fremont County in the lower left. This is a north configuration, so arrivals coming from the south, going to the north, departures going to the north, and then turning east. And then the next day we looked at, a little bit different. if you look at it closer, you can see that the green flight lines for arrivals are landing to the south, so they're lining themselves up in a sequence on the north side of the airport to land south. The yellow tracks, again, are departures that turn east. A little different activity down in the range, a little different activity up at the Air Force Academy and at Meadow Lake. Just to show some variation in the day. It's not as simple as flight track patterns. It is, as many people have mentioned here today, it's an interdependent kind of a question. Everything affects everything else. All of the flight tracks do weave together. And as you start to consider the noise contours, as you start to consider the overall land use planning and master plan for the airport, it's helpful to understand all of the players in the airspace and all the things that are happening in our neighborhood. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. And I think the upshot here is to your very point, we take all this into consideration as part of that larger master planning process. If you don't understand how the traffic works here, it's hard to understand how it's operating and what you need to protect for at the airport. So they really do go hand in glove. I just want to see if there's anything else anybody has on their mind, and also let you know that we're going to be reaching out, particularly Peterson representatives. We will be spending some time with you guys. We need to really sit down, compare notes. We really need your input. We've got some work to do that we're already engaged in terms of getting some mapping and plans on the table so that we have something that we're not just spitballing, but we're actually looking at what we actually need to do in terms of making sure that we've got a good set of plans, policies, procedures. But that's a roll up the sleeve time, and we'll be coming back to you to do exactly that. So we're looking forward to that. Anything else from anybody else? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to Hilary.
Nick, I do have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
One of the byproducts is the land use plan, right? Can you explain generally what that looks like, and I guess maybe more importantly, kind of what the end goal of that land use plan actually is?
Sure. In big picture, it's the mapping. It's a set of policies and a set of procedures that all work together in concert so that we have a common set of criteria for land use planning. We have a common understanding of the geography through the mapping, so that everybody is working from the same page. City, county planners, as land use plans come to you, as development plans come to you, before you refer them to the Airport Advisory Committee for their review, that you have the benefit of a common understanding of what it is we're all protecting for. Within that, hopefully, as we talked about, either taking the airport overlay zone as it exists today or something like that, again, with a set of procedures that probably even go further in terms of talking about what it is we're actually protecting for and why, so that everybody has a common understanding. Protecting against encroachment to protect the military mission well into the future, protecting the civilian mission at the airport. So that's what the plan is, and I think you had a second part to the question there.
Well, the second part was kind of the end goal, but I guess to kind of go off your response to the first question, are there going to be land use recommendations that are being made that kind of jive with what's already happening in the area, looking at some of the growth projections, that look at some of the existing zoning of properties? Are you getting to that level of detail? Because that has more of a material impact on what we do as land use planners. If it's just we don't want any development, that's probably not going to work.
Exactly.
Given the growth conditions that we're living in right now. So are you getting down to that level of detail when you're proposing a land use plan?
You really are. You have to look at what your existing condition is today. Both what you would consider compatible and incompatible already as it exists on the ground today. But you also have to look at how is land planned and zoned as it stands today before it's even developed? Let's just, whatever raw land remains out in the airport vicinity, what is that current zoning? And is that zoning in fact compatible? Are the plans for the land as it exists, are they compatible with what you're putting forward? So we have to work intimately with you at the county and the city on the same, within each of your jurisdictions to work through that, and then come up with a set of again, recommendations to take to your legislative bodies, be it the county or the city, to bring forward that set of plans. And then on the Airport Advisory Committee, kind of where does this end up as it relates to the airport? Is the Airport Advisory Committee, as you see all the time, they review the referrals for land use development or land development as it comes to them, giving them that same set of tools and a set of policies and procedures for them to have a common understanding of reviewing those projects, but also giving them that base set to work from, so that when they have to make a discretionary call, is something right, wrong, or indifferent in meeting up with the plans and policies that they have, that they have some boundary around what that discretion is, so that they don't have to make it up every time they go through and try and dig in and say, okay, so what does this mean for protecting the airport? What does it, is there something we should be doing about this or not? So it gives them a set of tools that are the common set of tools that you at the county and the city folks are working with as well.
And I want to add one thing in, too, is it creates some expectations for the development community. And I think that's important. I mean, I think that they need that. And while it's not an easy answer, and it's not an answer they may like, but it creates some more information for them to make their decisions as well. So, and that's why we've, included some conversations in the development community.
I found that they always love more regulation. So.
I know. I realize that we just hope they don't kill the messenger, but we know that it's going to be a tough message, but hopefully it will lessen some conflict for them. So, best of intentions.
And the funny thing about that, I guess what I've seen, it can be a tough message. At the same time, a common understanding and some level of certainty. If on the development community side, a lot of times what you want a stable understanding of what you can do, what is possible within the land that is available. If you're going to be applying capital to development, you need some level of certainty, and there are definitely folks out there that are just they're whatever you can get. So those are some of the challenges that we'll have to work through. It is not necessarily an easy process. We understand, have a decent understanding of some of the challenges you face on a regular basis. We don't live them like you live them, but we're certainly here to work with you. With, again, and your two-part question earlier, I'll just throw in there, what is the end objective? Our end objective is to make sure that the airport is successful for the future as an economic benefit to the entire community, that the base is protected from encroachment, and that it supports what this community needs, what that airport was put there to do, which is to be an economic engine for this region. And that's the message that we have to get out to everybody involved in this. Because I think what you would hear across the board from the development community and everybody else is that everybody benefits from that.
Okay, I'm just going to wrap it up and just talk to you a little bit about next steps. Obviously, we're anxious to sit down with the folks at Peterson and dive into the details in order to prepare an adequate forecast. We're working on finalizing that information. As I mentioned, we've received the noise. We're working on the noise contours. We'll have those ready. The current noise contours end of February. Future noise contours the end of March, and then we'll anticipate coming back, talking with you. Hopefully we've talked to a whole lot of you in between, and we'll be back with the Airport Commission and starting our conversations with the stakeholder groups. We think that the necessary information there is going to have those future contours available, so it's a meaningful dialogue. So, any questions? Well, again, we really look forward to working with you on this project, and should be great. Greg.
Sort of sum up real quick. it would be easy to look at Colorado Springs Airport and say, we don't have a problem. When you look at airports across the country, and you look at from our side of the airport, in the last 3 years, we've had 21 noise complaints. Now, that's not to say that Peterson hasn't had more than that. But when you look at San Francisco, when you look at SeaTac, when you look at Houston, Dallas, you see a whole different level of problem. What we have to do right now is make sure that 30 years from now, we're not in the same boat SFO's in. So I sit on a committee and attend forums that's a FAA invite-only thing with a bunch of those airports. And I listen to SFO lament about the hundreds of millions of dollars they've spent insulating homes around the airport. I listen to SeaTac talk about the continuing forums they have with the community about noise around the airport. Colorado Springs Airport was built out in the middle of nowhere a while ago. And we've watched for quite a while that we've just lived pretty happily and merrily along with the rest of the community. But what we're starting to see, and what our advisory commission is seeing, our board chair and vice chair sitting out there, John Meyer and Bill Nichols, that more and more the development is happening nearer and nearer the airport. With a modification to the annexation agreement with Banning Lewis Ranch, we have more and more developers interested in talking to us about potential development east of the airport, south of the airport, infill in every nook and cranny around the community. So this is the time for us to look at this. Now, I do want to say that if we were to do this, and you know, if you look at noise contours, many of you know, maybe most of you, that airplanes are getting quieter on the commercial side. Airplanes are getting quieter on the large GA, heavy metal side. Military airplanes aren't necessarily getting quieter. If we were to do this and not take into account the military aircraft, we would be, it would be a wasted study, frankly. We'd be doing us all a disservice. So what we've asked Aviation to do is look at not just the standard noise contours that an FAA process would require, but to look beyond that and look at single noise event levels, to look at the specific military aircraft that we know operate in and out of here. You know, you mentioned the MAFs for a second. Oh, well, I'm going to tell you now, there's an announcement coming out tomorrow, and it's something that's going to work with the MAFs. Something that's going to be great for the airport, and it's going to bring more aircraft here, particularly during fire season. That's all I'm going to say. So, again, I'll close and say this really is a great time for our community, for the airport. Whether Space Command ends up at Peterson or not, we know there will be growth. We know there will be development. We want to do everything we can to support that. So that's what we're going to do. So the folks from Aviation, they're really early in the process here, but they will be involved in the community. They will be looking at this. And we do hope to make this a great study that complements JLUS and complements some of the other efforts in the community. Keith, I think you're absolutely right. You know, we need to be looking at the flight tracks, and that's why we're excited to have Greg Dyer on the team to help us do all that. So thank you all. We've probably taken more than our share of time, but really appreciate the chance to come talk to you and look forward to working through this process. Counselor, I yield the floor.
Thank you, Greg. Moving on to the action items. Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado Springs Airport Working Group implementation.
So we kind of did this in particular orders of getting kind of a sense of what the Colorado Springs Airport Master Plan, kind of what that process was going to be looking like going forward. And then we wanted to kind of drill down into what we can kind of do on our end as the JLUS Implementation Committee. At our last meeting, we talked about approval of creating Colorado Springs Airport, Peterson Air Force Base kind of working group that would start to dig into some of those issues and allow for some of those more technical discussions that might need to occur, that could then, we can take the input from that and kind of feed it into this process as needed and provide another opportunity for other engagement where necessary with JViation and that master plan. So I wanted to just note that after this, we did kind of last minute yesterday figure out that, while JViation is here, some folks from Peterson and JViation are trying to meet after this. So if there's someone else that does feel like it's important related to operations to join in on that, we're going to be doing that at 3:30. But for the overall group, what we want to tie this into is how this relates to Grant Task 4, which is the Peterson Air Force Base Sub-Area Plan and Mapping. Our ideas, based upon very preliminary discussions before seeing a lot of this process and what it was going to look like, because a lot of us staff only saw this yesterday for the first time. What we wanted to throw out to the group was to have a discussion. Nothing's under approval here or a recommendation. We just wanted to have a discussion that as you look at all these issues that are kind of being presented, the various plans going on in the area, what within the context of JLUS, what are the kind of things that we should try and discuss as with this working group that we're going to create? Are there particular topics we should really dig into? And one of the things we kind of thought about is that, okay, we know we're probably going to need to do maybe at least 3 meetings during this just because of the level of content. But we thought where we might want to start is with taking some of the data related to the military imaginary surfaces that relate to kind of what they need as they get off the ground, and overlay that with some of the civilian configurations to see how close they are. How much of a difference are we talking about? How important is that? Start the discussion there, and then look at kind of what are the similarities in operations. So that was one of the things we thought about starting, but we wanted to get a sense from the overall committee that as we kind of use that to inform, maybe we can start to dig into and do some kind of looking at both city and county codes, if that makes sense, to start and identify where might be some critical things that kind of relate to this. And so I wanted to open it up to this group. What are some things that we should look into with this working group that relates to supporting this master plan and might get at digging into some information a little bit more in depth that we might be able to do from the military community partnership side? So I wanted to open up to the group. Any thoughts that you want to give to staff as to how we should move forward with this working group in the context of this master plan? Any thoughts?
I was just reading through the list. I think the list is pretty good, comprehensive as you have it. I'm sure other things will come up during the meetings, but that's a lot of the list you have there is a lot of what we've brought up so far.
Okay. We want to make sure we're getting the right starting point, because we understand as the conversations go on, there'll be kind of other things that come up where, we need to dig into that more. But we want to make sure that we're starting at a good place, and is there anything we're missing that we need to consider as we're going forward?
Just maybe looking at it as looking at maybe 2.2.14. This may go into some of those types of paragraphs, but I don't forget about the traffic impacts like Jeff brought up.
Okay.
So there are other things besides flight operations.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think this is going to be a good opportunity, given kind of the scope of where you guys are starting with the flight-related. We can start to dig into some of those traffic and maybe a few of those other things that we're already aware of, immediately start to have those conversations, and then we've already kind of given you a head start in terms of gathering some information. We'll just feed you whatever information you think would be helpful for us to have a local conversation, bring stakeholders together.
Yeah, I think that'll be really helpful. We kind of view a lot of what you've done as, for lack of a better term, an input into what we're doing. We do have, when you're talking about the imaginary surfaces, I think it is useful to incorporate the military imaginary surfaces with Part 77, which we already have. We have the Part 77. The overlay seems to incorporate some of the military imaginary surfaces, but I think we as a team need to kind of better understand that with some cooperation from the base. That would be very helpful. But I do think that part of what we're doing is to kind of look at that and look at, do we need to recreate or modify the existing overlay with a combination of Part 77 and phased airspace or surfaces.
Yep, so just get with Kevin afterwards. Make sure you have Kevin's contact info and also Courtney Davis. So those two will be our main points of contact.
Okay, and just to kind of highlight also, what we plan to do, our goal, and this may change depending on where the conversation goes, but our idea is that we document the input and kind of what we learned during these working groups, and we'd create sort of a summary report of kind of what were the outcomes, what were the discoveries, what were the kind of inputs, and that way we have some kind of record on our end that fulfills our grant task, but then that can be used as a resource in whatever makes sense for the master plan and for your process. So that's one of the ideas we thought of as an output from what we do with the working group. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do have a thought on that. What's important for us, I guess, from the consultant side is that we are working for the airport. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves in the study that we're doing for the airport.
Yeah.
With consideration to your study. So I think there needs to be kind of a balance between what we're doing for them and how we're aiding in the JLUS implementation.
And our goal always is to make sure we're not duplicating something that's going to be done, about to be done, or in process. So that's where we'll continue to communicate and make sure we're staying in a place that's not going to be confusing things or not duplicating. We'll make sure that we're doing something that wasn't already a part of the scope or is going to be a good input into your process, and then you guys are able to take that and do something else with it, develop it further. So, yeah, we'll just keep communication on that and make sure that we're fulfilling a role that's useful for the community stakeholders, the military, and fits in, dovetails well with what you guys are doing, the county master plan, and so on, and make sure,
Brian, your list of recommended actions really don't touch on traffic at all, which has been discussed already. And I say that because your working group also does not. I would recommend that you have sort of a subcommittee that includes CDOT, CDOT traffic, not CDOT airspace representative, county DOT, and our transportation planner, and probably city DOT.
And then I'll throw this out based upon that comment and see if this sounds like a good idea. We'll start off with kind of, to be given the schedule with what's going on, trying to have some recommendations by May. We'll start off with some of the input related to airport functions as a flight and land use. But then as we kind of wrap that up, then we'll kick off on shifting the membership to have more of a transportation focus. And then we can kind of hit that off, because that should tie in well with what I understand to be the schedule. Does that sound about right? Okay.
Yeah, I think that'll work with the master plan.
Okay.
That's going to be a very important component to the airport master plan, is the regional roadway access. We have a subconsultant that specializes in transportation. I think they actually worked on the regional transportation plan for Colorado Springs.
Okay.
So they're going to be a key player in the master plan. So I think the timing is good, but it may not jive exactly with where you guys are. We still have yet to start the formal airport master plan. This being the land use study component, it has elements that will roll into the master plan, but the master plan is still kind of in that scoping phase.
Okay. And of course, we'll stay with just kind of seeing where we can bridge a gap or take some of these recommended actions from the report and see if we can take them a couple steps further. And we'll just go to that extent without going into full depth analysis of anything. We'll just kind of start that discussion, see what input we can get, considerations, and then that way it's at a point where it's not fully developed, it's not duplicating what you guys are about to do, but it's kind of taking it to a point where you have a little more information maybe from some of these stakeholders. And we'll keep working on what that looks like. But I appreciate your point about the transportation.
And I'd note the county updates our major transportation corridors plan every 5 years. We're in between those updates right now, so the timing is appropriate.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. Brian, you got a couple points in here, 1.2.4, which is incorporating military accident potential zone standards in the city and county GIS zoning codes and maps. And then a companion one down there, implement, is 2.2.13, implement consistent and compatible zoning regulations for land areas within APZs, accident potential zones. We have some of that. I don't know that we have the military accident potential zones. I know we have accident potential zones set up in the city. Those zones are in place in the county, in the JIS, but I don't think we have consistent zoning regulations between city and county for those accident potential zones. And I think that's an area of particular interest.
Okay.
Yeah, they're already in our GIS, and they're shown in our zoning. And there are restrictions in terms of use. But I can't speak as to whether or not they mirror the city or the city mirrors the county, however you choose to phrase that.
Okay.
And ensure that we are consistent across that, because it doesn't matter which jurisdiction the airplane hits,
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think I have enough.
you got one more behind you?
Sorry, go ahead.
So, talk for just a second about your process, and do you have any steps in your process where your plan ultimately has to be adopted by anyone, or is this truly one that's just trying to bring all the parties together?
That makes sense. I should give a little bit of background, given that many in the room here that are local, of course, have seen kind of the JLUS study as it's gone about. So the kind of where we're at is that we tried to hit, there were so many issues amongst 5 bases, and we tried to capture what are those various land use encroachment issues and so on related to military bases, places where there's mutual. Many of you are familiar with JLUS studies in general. So we got to the point where we completed that study, that report, and so that report is done. So as it comes to creating any additional reports, we're not planning to do anything with that. This body is entirely recommendational. It's a place to discuss and kind of examine these issues, figure out what might be good paths forward, have these kind of connections and networking between military and community. So what we see with this process is that we're taking the 107 recommendations that came out of this, and the scope of our grant was kind of take those and see where we can start to advance those further in some respect. Figure out what's a way to move forward with the execution. We don't anticipate through this process that we would be necessarily, of course, getting all of those to a point of completion, or, and again, we're all recommendational. It's all partnership to try and advance things as much as possible. So the way we looked at it, this was crafted prior to knowing that there was going to be an airport master plan update. So that's where we've had to kind of figure out a way to shift our approach, because originally we were looking at creating a sector plan that would not be anywhere close to a full airport master plan update, but just be some level of focus and more honing in detail into that area. So with that, I would say that the way this is tailoring in now, our role here is that we're trying to take this set of actions that related to Peterson Air Force Base and community zoning from the county and city and the airport, and figure out how to take those actions and advance them in some way, get them to the next step, or facilitate or encourage stakeholders that are a member of this to take action on those. So we're going to try and do as much as we can from our end to advance these in whatever way makes sense, and so that's part of where we're at. And so we see the airport master plan as one of those key activities that's going on that could potentially incorporate and advance some of these issues. And so it's just a matter of figuring out how, to what extent, how far do we get. So that's kind of how we're viewing the way this might tie in. And again, we'll continue to convene this body once every 3 months. Our grant goes through the end of this year, and then after that, we'll see where we're at. But the idea is to just advance things as much as possible. So anyway, sorry I hadn't provided that context previously.
That's very helpful. Normally when you have different jurisdictions, that's the purpose of the JLUS, is to bring all those jurisdictions together, get them talking. We got to roll up our sleeves and get it done.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of in summary what we're thinking at this time. And things can adjust, and we always ask the committee to inform how staff can operate to advance these things. So yeah.
With that, I think we have this as an action item to approve what you have, and with the comments that we've had, entertain a motion to approve? Or do you have?
I don't think there is an approval with this. It was simply a matter of.
That's what you've got listed here.
Oh, okay.
Review and approve.
I see our action requested at the top does not reflect the recommendation at the bottom. I apologize for that. I think we may have that on each one of these.
So you want to? So this was a review and discussion?
Yes. This was
Was
a
that
review
your
and
intention?
discuss. The intent with all these was review and discuss, not review and approve.
Okay.
I apologize.
Any other comments, final around this one? Okay, moving on to the next, Air Force Academy Area Working Group Implementation.
All right, thanks for hanging in there, everyone. Again, I'm Ann Werner, Planner 2 for the JLUS project. And although I'm sort of the lead for the Air Force Academy sub-area plan, and Brian more so for the Peterson, we are working like we always do as a giant team of two, and everything we do jointly and also interface and represent each other at meetings. And I think that, that helps a lot, especially with the amount of overlap that's going to be happening between all the various plans that are taking place. The Air Force Academy sub-area group, a lot of research and work's been done up front. We had our first meeting with the Air Force Academy staff prior to Christmas to kind of hammer out the logistics, what the group would look like, what the major areas of focus would be for the Air Force Academy and that sub-area plan. And what we found is that if you've not had a chance to completely read through item 5B, I encourage you to do so. Thanks, Brian. I can't talk and drive at the same time, which is really good for you guys. What came out of that meeting was the Air Force Academy coming back to us and saying, here are our three primary areas of focus. Number one, to recognize the airfield as an airport and work on those overlays with the city and county. Number two, stormwater. Work on the issues and impacts that stormwater has had, and all this is spelled out in the JLUS. From development to the north and northeast and east of the Air Force Academy, it comes through their property and continues to be more impactful as development occurs. Third area of focus for the sub-area group will be for transportation and traffic. Again, a common theme amongst everything we've talked about today. Although we're going to focus primarily the first 6 months or so really working on the airfield part of it, we are not ignoring the other two. Our hope is to be able to establish the beginnings, get the ball rolling, so to speak, on transportation and stormwater. Because if you drive on I-25 up there by Northgate, you'll notice the powers grading and work is being done now in the median. On the heels of that will come that whole development around the Northgate properties for the new visitor center, the hotel complexes, the commercial development that's going to occur in association with that. So we cannot wait on those other two topics. So in 5B, we've included what we think is vital to the success of the sub-area, which was the ACUS that the Academy did in 2019. It spells out specifically the desires and things that need to happen to help support the findings of the ACUS and to move the JLUS sub-area plan forward in light of that. So we included some specific pages and some specific documentation from the ACUS itself to help you understand what we're going to focus on with the sub-area group. So we expect, with the Air Force Academy, to spend a significant amount of time during the first 6 months, mainly because we want to dovetail into the city's zoning code update, Chapter 7 of their city code, subdivision and zoning regulations. My understanding is that focus group is going to put a lot of time in the first initial phases of those revisions on the zoning part of it right away, so right up front. So that's why we're going to put the airfield first in our order of priority. And that also works well with what the airport's doing too with their study. So in light of that, and we're not asking again for a motion, so we do apologize for that, we're kind of going over what the working group will do and who will be involved. So with the Academy, we're going to expect to meet very frequently, just because of the volume of work to be done in each of these three focus areas. And on page, let's see here, let's go over the list. Oh boy, page 404 on 5B, we've kind of noted some of the representatives that we would like to have on the Air Force Academy Working Group. We know that some of you are kind of meetinged out, that you're already involved in a lot of processes. We've got a lot of groups meeting already. But this is a steep climb, but it's also a great opportunity to kind of bundle all the processes together, even though you've got more meetings potentially to attend to, getting it all done at once means there'll be less meetings later. And you know, it's kind of like get your homework done first and you can go out and play. So it's just kind of one way to look at it. You know, my kids didn't buy it too much, but I always had a treat at the end. So I'll treat you all at the end on this working group. I don't know what yet, but there'll be some sort of reward for your hard work. So think about on this list, that's what we're going to meet with the Academy at tomorrow. We're going to talk about players to be on this group, primarily from the list, not to have too many, but we're right around a dozen right now. Most importantly is to include representatives, city and county, that can make policy level decisions. So if you've sent a representative, you only want to send one person. That person, and we understand that person should have the ability to make comments that would affect and be taken back to be policy, where you're looking at it in your master plans or your zoning rewrites. That's one thing that we would like to see for sure. We think that's important. Other than that, you know, kind of right now we'll open it up. Based on this list, do you guys have any further suggestions or thoughts?
And I'll just kind of build upon what Craig said. We did intend, of course, that, you know, this right now is kind of displaying what relates mostly to the zoning airfield part. We did intend that later on we'd convene a transportation. So the stakeholders seen up here are not necessarily all-encompassing of the transportation part. This list is focused at least on land use and that first part of it. So just to build upon what you said earlier, the same thing applies with this.
And these meetings, too, won't always have to be in person. They'll be touch base. They can be remote. We're going to do what works best for the working group, but we just want to make progress in the short time frame we have. So I'll be reaching out to those that are on this list and others within this group just to kind of get a feel for who can be on the committee, who would like to be on the committee, who we'd like to see on the committee. So we'll start that process tomorrow with the Academy. Go ahead, Amy.
Just a clarification on the list. You mentioned including the level of policy decision maker. Right now it's noted just by the city. I was wondering if it should also be noted by the county.
Should be. That was oversight on my part. So
I think it's just city, actually.
A lot with the city. So given that, I think that, that meets our objective here as far as discussing the activities, working on the sub-area plan, the mapping associated with it. Anything else that anyone has heard or has questions on that you would like to either make a comment about or make a suggestion of while I'm still up here? Nope. Awesome. Okay. You know how to reach me if you have any questions, even after the fact. Thank you.
Thank you. And Public Lands Working Group implementation. Back up for round 3.
Yes, and this will be brief. This one is a little bit more general in terms of the meeting. This is one that's the Public Lands Working Group is intended to accommodate a lot of the engagement with U.S. Forest Service, BLM, and just having a forum for discussion about some of these rural land issues. And where we thought might be the best place to start, given that there are some conversations already occurring between various stakeholders, is kick off with looking at what are some of the mutual concerns right now about land management as it relates to wildfire. Since wildfires, obviously, we're not in wildfire season right now, but that's coming up. Understanding, have an opportunity to hear from the BLM and Forest Service as to what things they're working on currently. And we do know that the BLM has mentioned they really like the idea of engaging the communities through this working group. And so that can be a starting point to just see what is currently occurring with wildfire, and then figuring out how that can tie in with those fire professionals that are key, and find out what relationships are existing, what relationships might need to be formed, and then figure out how to kind of outsource that to those fire professionals and get them connected and military in whatever way, shape, or form. After that, then we can start to look at other issues that are of mutual interest between the military and conservation partners, open space opportunities, collaboration on things that might include buffering. And so just having some very general conversations amongst those very large, mainly counties in most cases, that have a lot of public lands within their within their purview. So that was the general idea behind this. And this group could meet as much as the contingents showing up, the representatives feel would be necessary. Are there any other working group representatives that we should include? This was a initial list, but we anticipate there'd be other partners that you thought might be good to have at the table. And we also look to you, are there, as community members, are there, and military partners, are there topics that you think we should really make sure we discuss during these working group meetings?
Mark?
Thank you. As far as the goals and the working group actions, I think they look good. There's one we might want to modify slightly. If you look at under working group actions 3.1.2, and it states refined coordination and emergency response for combating wildfires throughout the JLUS area. We may want to add combating wildfires and post-fire flooding type issues under that particular item. And then with respect to the working group representation, obviously I'm pleased to hear BLM will be involved. If you could add them to the list, I didn't see that in there, please. And as far as county representation goes, when you look at the high altitude mountain environment training that has taken place in Teller, Fremont, also in Park County over the years, so maybe connect with Park County and add them if you deem it appropriate and applicable. Also noted Pueblo County, we have representation on that list to the south. What about Douglas County to the north? Open space representation, does that include recreation and conservation? So perhaps recreation and conservation could be covered under working group representation. And then finally, what about watershed management and protection representation?
Yeah, and given your comment there about watershed, and because those two topics of wildfire and watershed are completely integrated in terms of their relationship. So, yeah, I think that's a good point to try and figure out how can that factor into this. We'll have to give some thought as to, because that's a whole other set of people. But it may be, again, we may have to have two different discussions going on, or it starts out as one in some way, shape, or form, and then kind of as we get along the lines of doing more technical focus, having those groups split to one is really focused on the fire mitigation aspect or pest management that relates to creation of those, and then having some of those people tie in with the watershed and having that as a separate group kind of within this purview. So we'll give that some thought. Those are some good points because they absolutely are tied, because obviously the watershed management and the after effects are something that, once it happens, there's years of work that needs to be done in coordination. So we'll see how we might be able to tackle that, or at least kick off some kind of conversation related to that.
Yeah, thanks for the consideration.
Sure.
Hey, Brian, a couple points. Kind of along that line, since the watershed was something a little bit more than what was originally envisioned in this, Colorado Springs Utilities and other water providers in there have an awful lot of involvement in these areas, so you probably need to have a chat with them.
And I think also, just to give a little context, because of the fact that we're not watershed experts in our own right, we're not necessarily wildfire experts in our own right, but our idea would be to facilitate and figure out, is someone already working on this? Or if there is someone like CSU or some other consortium, that'd be a good kind of place for this to live and kind of help provide some input into that. We'll see if there's a way to kind of, that we can play a role in maybe kicking something off that might be able to getting folks together, and then they're able to run with it. Because obviously it's not something that just be here as long as there's JLUS implementation funding. It's something that should exist if it doesn't already, but we'll have to dig into that.
Yeah, that's
so.
kind of my point. It has existed for quite a while now.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to jump into this area,
Okay.
you need to jump on board with what's already ongoing in that respect, because there's a lot of work on that.
That's what we figured.
In recovering from the fires that we have already had, the effort of fire coordination and watershed management is high on a lot of people's radar.
We'll definitely engage them to see where things are at, so with it, we have a better understanding of that.
Yeah, and
aspect.
the other comment I would make, one of the primary reasons we started this was for the high-altitude training, the impact on public lands. So, I think it's all the way to the last page before you got one bullet. So that, I think, was our primary focus when we started this particular piece, so probably need to emphasize that.
And our goal for this meeting was actually see if we get some from BLM here to talk about their EA that they were working on, to have that conversation. And simply because we couldn't get someone here, we weren't able to have that. So we figure we're going to try and get that involved in this as much as possible. And I didn't get into depth with that with this memo. So, yes.
Okay. We'll tell them if they don't show up, we'll annex them.
Keith Berger from BLM. Can you hear me
Awesome.
okay?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to let you know, and ended up joining late, but yeah, I think maybe that you could brief that working group on where we are with some of the authorizations we've been looking at for some of the high altitude training, and we'd be happy to kind of bring that discussion to the table at the appropriate time too.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you.
Excellent.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Would now be a good time for him to
elaborate? Mr. Berger, if you'd like, would you like to just give us some highlights at this point? I know that you had a particular individual that I'm blanking on the name right now, who had done the main work on this, but would you be able to give us kind of a brief overview of anything that came out of that?
Matt, I can give you about the 30-second version if that's helpful for you.
That would be great.
A number of years ago, Fort Carson approached Bureau of Land Management looking for some authorization to do some what we commonly refer to as kind of touch-and-go landings on land administered by the Bureau of Land Management for their high-altitude mountain terrain training, for their helicopter training. They have been doing that in the past and continue to do that on the U.S. Forest Service. But a number of years ago, they were looking to expand that availability of sites they could use. And so they started talking to us. We initially took a hard look at what they were doing. And I think our determination at that time was it fell under what we would call casual use, which means that really if there's no real impacts to resources or the environment, that they don't necessarily need a permit or some kind of authorization for BLM to do that. There's a policy out on that BLM has, and certainly their use seemed to fall under that policy. So for a number of years there, we allowed those landings, and they had some certain sideboards on there, what areas they could maybe use and what areas they should stay away from. So we had some sideboards, but we felt like as long as their use fell within those sideboards, it was considered casual use and didn't really need an authorization from us. After a while, they seemed to be, I think, pretty pleased with the areas they were allowed to use in there, and they came to us and suggested that they would like to look at more of a permanent arrangement. And so we took a look at that and kind of came to the conclusion that, well, what I would call maybe temporary use might be considered casual use if it was a long-term kind of thing that they were looking for, a long-term commitment. We can certainly see that there could be impacts associated with more long-term use than they were if they were strictly temporary or intermittent. So at that point in time, we started an analysis consistent with the National Environmental Policy Act. We started an environmental analysis to kind of look at what the impacts of that use would be on both the human and natural environments. We had a series of public meetings at that time, got some good feedback from the public on that. I think Fort Carson sat in on all those meetings, those initial meetings we had with the public, and kind of took a look at maybe their operations, what they were proposing, and in response to some of the public concerns, public comments, they modified that, came out with another plan of development, what we call a plan of operation or a plan of development. And they brought that back to BLM. That's kind of undergone a series of kind of reiterations as kind of their needs have changed. Maybe they've had some people ship out, new people come working on the project. But I think we finally got together a pretty good description of what they were looking for. So we started the environmental assessment process on that. The process requires us to actually look at, come up with different alternatives to that use. So we've had our staff working on those. There's a couple different alternatives for the areas that the Army would like to use for their training purposes. I would say we're most of the way through that process. We kind of have a draft final review, or a draft we're looking at with our final review. That's still internal. We released a public draft several months ago, got some good comments back on that. Took all those public comments into consideration and are working on finalizing the analysis. So that's where we're at right now. Boy, I would hesitate to give you a time frame on when we'll finalize that, just because every time I do, it turns out to be wrong. So, but I would say we're getting pretty close on that. I wouldn't be surprised to see something available for public to look at, that final version, probably within the next month or maybe two, something like that. That gives you a rough time frame. Does that kind of answer the questions?
That helps, Keith. And Keith, this is Keith Klein, the Defense Mission Task Force, and you and I have spoken on this in the past. Annie Oatman-Gardner approached me from Senator Bennett's office just yesterday, in fact, asking if I'd heard anything more recent on it. So it's good to hear that you're moving right along on those things. I just want to be clear that the Army still has the right to casual use in accordance with the previous understandings, correct, up until such time as some new discovery is, or some new determination is made.
Yeah, what we've done in the past is, I wouldn't call it an authorization, but it's a letter kind of specifically stating that if the Army abides within those kind of broad guidelines I was talking about before, that their use would be considered casual use. And we just reissued that letter a little bit ago, understanding that if the Army had a need to fly, at least until we got the authorization or the analysis completed, made a final determination at that point. But in the meantime, yes, we're considering the use that the Army's doing now as that casual use.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay.
All right, that's all I have. Are there any other comments related to this working group, other items we should look at?
Brian, along the lines of your not wanting to duplicate efforts, you're aware of the effort we've got, the ongoing discussions we've got with the State Land Board,
Yes.
Trust for Public Lands,
Yes.
the Nature Conservancy.
Yes.
Today we included the State Park Service
Yes.
In that, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers as a contributor. So lots of conversation going on there. I expect there will be another meeting that folks could attend if they chose. Might be in Denver, might be here, but either the 11th or 12th of March. And more to follow on that, but I think there's going to be another meeting. We've had two subsequent meetings to the one you attended in Denver. There's going to be another very public one like that, we think, on either the 10th or 11th of March. Exact time and place yet to be determined.
Yeah, and that's in our intent to kind of go on to some other topics that are not already being covered. So you're absolutely right on that. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
Brian, when you bring in stormwater,
Yeah.
And the idea of stormwater, that opens up the group big time, in my
Yes.
opinion. You start adding in probably the Pikes Peak Rural Water Authority.
Mhm.
Those are multiple water providers that are not CSU, but CSU does participate in their meetings.
You add in the Fountain Creek watershed district.
Yeah.
You add in both city and county stormwater divisions.
Yep.
And then kind of from a public land standpoint, particularly in the kind of the mindset of shooting ranges, you probably add in Colorado Parks and Wildlife as well.
Yep. And that's where I think we're going to have to kind of go back and see what is going on to see if there is something there, because there is a lot going on already with that. And
You could end up with a huge group really fast.
And we don't want to duplicate efforts. So if it comes down to us just figuring out what is the lay of the land on that and figuring out how to get other partners involved in those, we can go that direction. So we'll have to go back and do some research here and talk to a few folks that you've mentioned to kind of, because that wasn't something we originally anticipated. So we'll go back and look and see what we can do with that and communicate with you, Commissioner, and see where we can facilitate something. So we'll use that tack on it.
Well, I would add to that comment that, I think it's very relevant to look at some of these issues as they relate to the bases.
Yes.
But as we get too far out there, you might be spreading yourself too thin.
Yeah, that's our concern. We want to make sure that we can kind of tie things up in a way. Or be able to hand off something if need be.
Or not even get into it.
That's yeah.
And I do know that stormwater was highlighted for each base.
Yes.
In the JLUS plan. In my opinion, that's such a big deal right now.
Yeah.
It kind of requires its own conversation with the representatives that are the experts in that field.
Yes.
Without diluting what you're trying to accomplish here, I think.
Good joke using the word diluting.
You're welcome.
Very nice. Yeah.
We detained everything.
Very nice.
Oh, good.
No, terrible.
That's good. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Well, I will do neither one no further. So
I'm stealing that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I think I know what I need to work on next with this. So
Okay.
we will see what we can do to kind of wrap things or kind of cut ourselves off in certain ways.
That's good.
Okay.
Last item's up is information items, installation reports relating to land use as opposed to PR. Anything else walking around?
Nothing further from Peterson.
Nothing further? From the community reports, the cities? Okay, future meeting date, next one's up, April 23rd, I think, even. And no other further comments, so we'll stand adjourned.